Hi, my name's Rob Layfield and I'm a Professor of Biochemistry at the University of Nottingham, and I'm also a member of the archaeological research team working here with colleagues at Norton Priory Museum. Norton Priory has a long history of research, including scientific research into a really unusual ancient form of the skeletal disorder, Paget's disease of bone, which affects many of the medieval human skeletons here in the collection. One of the collaborations is between the University of Nottingham and Norton Priory, and this is supported by the Paget's Association. And as part of that work, we've been able to study molecules which we've found really unexpectedly are preserved in ancient bone, in skeletons from the Norton Priory collection for many hundreds of years. And by analysing those proteins, we can understand more about the life history of people who lived here at the Priory maybe 800 or 900 years ago. So what we've done is put together a series of educational resources and hands-on activities to try and tell you more about our research and to try and stimulate your interest in science, in medicine, in archaeology, and maybe encourage you to come and visit the museum. So if you come along to Norton Priory Museum, you can also get hands-on with some of our 3D printed models. And obviously we don't want you to pick up and handle human skeletons, that wouldn't be right. But what we do have are really realistic 3D printed models of some of the skeletons in our collection. And here's an example. This is a medieval femur bone. So this would be a bone that was maybe 700 or 800 years old, that is an accurate reconstruction of some of the skeletons on display in the gallery here at the Priory. So this is a femur, a leg bone, and if I was going to put this 3D bone into context, it would sit, the ball there would sit into my hip, and then my knee joint would be down at the bottom here, like so. So I can handle these, and actually these are 3D models not of normal bones, but now these are the disease bones, those bones affected by the medieval Paget's disease of bone. And it's maybe quite tricky to see on the camera, but if you come into the museum, you'll get a much better idea. What you can see are the areas of bone where there's normal bone formation, and then the abnormal bone formation as well. And it's this abnormal bone formation that characterizes the disease Paget's disease of bone. And so come along and you can actually see what's going on by handling and touching some of these bones. And we've got images as well. We've been able to image some of the bones in the collection using x-rays, the same sort of x-rays that we use clinically today. You can use them on ancient skeletons, and we can look inside those bones and see the characteristic changes that represent Paget's disease, the Paget's light changes in these bones, which are many hundreds of years old. So let's go for a little wander into the gallery then and actually look at some real skeletons, and let's see how good these 3D models are at reproducing what's on display here at Norton Priory. So now we're in the gallery and I'm looking at some of the real skeletons in the collection here at Norton Priory. And I've brought along with me my 3D printed models so you can get an idea of how accurate these models are, how much they resemble the original skeletons that are on display. And actually, we've got lots of 3D models here at Norton. We've got a handling collection where you can come along and you can have a look at the bones themselves. You can try and pick out the bone disease, and you can match them maybe to your own skeleton as well and work out what goes where. So these display boards give more information about some of the research that Norton Priory has been involved in with the University of Nottingham. And just starting off, I've introduced these unusual ancient forms of Paget's disease. Well, this tells you about why we think they're unusual, or what was different about ancient Paget's disease in medieval times here in Runcorn compared to Paget's disease today. And you can read about some of the main differences on this display. Ancient proteins are the molecules that I've told you that we study, and it's these ancient proteins that preserve information about history and tell us about the life history of people and of objects here at the Priory. And so it's through analysis of ancient proteins preserved in the skeletons at Norton Priory that we were able to confirm that, in fact, this unusual bone disease that affects so many skeletons in the collection really was a precursor of Paget's disease of bone. Now, not only do ancient proteins allow us to study history of disease, history of Paget's disease, but it's a much broader field. And there's a field emerging now called bioarchaeology, where we can study ancient molecules, including ancient proteins, and ask a whole range of questions. So, for example, ancient proteins preserved, say, on ceramics or pots might tell us about ancient diets, medieval diets, so-called paleo diets. And likewise, we can study construction techniques as well. What were our ancestors making objects out of, and how were they building? What were their construction techniques? Protein signatures preserved for hundreds of years that we can now analyse shed light on some of these really important questions. And one of these activities then is a kind of pin the tail on the donkey. This is a bioarchaeology exhibition, and this shows you the different types of analyses or the different types of insights that ancient protein analysis can give us. So what you can do is pin the correct answer onto the appropriate point, and we can see that ancient proteins tell us about spread of disease, they tell us about nutrition, they tell us about production of crops, and they tell us about what contents were within some of the archaeological objects that maybe are on display here at Norton Priory. So come along, you can have a play, you can stick them on, you can't go wrong, and you can take them off again and you can see the actual answers down at the bottom there. You can learn a lot more about science and actually how science and archaeology is now combining to be really powerful interdisciplinary research. So one of our other fun activities that you can download and you can actually do at home is something we call Kitchen Science. And this lets you perform your own scientific experiment in your house, in your kitchen. And the one that I'm just going to show you is something called bendy bones. So you can download the instructions for bendy bones from the website. And what this does then is it lets you study the components of bones. The bones I'm using are bones that have just come from my Sunday dinner. I had a nice roast chicken on Sunday, and I've cleaned some of the bones that we didn't eat when we had our Sunday lunch. And what we do is we take those bones, and remember those bones are really strong. Bones need to be strong to support our skeleton. And they're strong because they've got a mixture of inorganic component, something we call calcium phosphate, and then of a protein component. And together they make the bones strong and they make them durable. Now in this activity, what we do is we remove that so-called inorganic component. And the way we can do that is simply using vinegar, the same vinegar that you use in cooking or you use in food preparation. Just buy it from the supermarket. We put the vinegar into a container, be it a glass or any other container. We take our our cleaned bones, we drop it into the vinegar, and then we wait. And unfortunately, you've got to wait for 2 or 3 days. But in those 2 to 3 days, the vinegar dissolves away that calcium phosphate, that strong inorganic material, but it doesn't touch the protein. And what's left after you've dissolved in vinegar is just the protein part of the bone. And here's one I prepared earlier. So after 3 days, this bone is no longer strong, no longer brittle. This bone is really, really bendy. And you can produce your own bendy bones. So it's bendy because all that I've got left here is that protein component, and mainly it's a protein called collagen. And actually, when we study ancient proteins preserved in skeletal remains, in bones and teeth, it's largely the collagen that's preserved for hundreds or thousands or maybe even millions of years. So how cool is that? You can do your own science, your own experiment at home. So some of our resources allow you to learn more about healthy bones and healthy skeletons. We've got these portable 3D models of human skeletons as well, and you can see the physiology, you can see how the bones connect together and how they work. And we also have models of teeth as well. So remember, skeletons are not just bones, but the teeth are really important. And in archaeology, in fact, it's the teeth that preserve lots of the ancient biomolecules, including the ancient proteins, that we've been able to study in our research. Now, clearly, these teeth I'm showing you here, 65 million years of age, these don't come from Norton Priory, but they just illustrate that in the archaeological record, there are these skeletal materials that probably contain really useful information that can tell us about life history of organisms that existed millions of years ago from today. Okay, and so what I now want to do is just bring in my assistant Paul, who's going to show us one of our other resources. This is something called the Virtuality, and this is really, really cool. So this allows you to have a look inside your own skeleton, your own body, or maybe that of a friend or a colleague as well. And the way in which it works is it's really simple. We've got this T-shirt, and the T-shirt has on it printed a pattern, and that pattern is recognised by a simple app that you can download onto your mobile phone. And I've got one here. Here's my phone, and I'm going to demonstrate this now. So Paul is going to move into pride of place, and I'm going to come round, and hopefully with this app you'll be able to look inside Paul's body, and we'll be able to have a look at his skeleton, at his bones. So here we go then. The app's coming on. It's recognising Paul, and straight away it's picking out inside Paul's body. Isn't that really cool? And of course we're interested in bones, interested in the skeleton. So what I'm going to do is tap there, and we can see in animation, or we can see in real time, something that resembles Paul's skeleton that's functioning in his body. And we can actually look at the other systems in Paul's body as well, and there is a commentary that goes with this app as well, and the ability to take photos and to share them and to put them on the web and tell folks about your visit here to Norton Priory. So, thank you Paul, I'll come back round and I'll usher you away. But that really summarises some of our resources that we've got here. These are just a flavour of some of the hands-on activities that you could see if you visit the museum. And as I've said, maybe as well we could work out a way that you could borrow those activities and run them in your own groups and in your own schools as well.
We are really fortunate that our collection has been the subject of cutting-edge research with the Paget's Association into Paget's disease of the bone. A unique workshop has been developed to engage pupils with this fascinating scientific story through investigation and inquiry-based learning. This session would support learning about medicine through time and local history studies. Our education sessions facilitate unique hands-on experiences, aim to instil pride in local history, and hopefully will inspire some osteoarchaeologists and historians of the future.
The workshop itself is great just because it's hands-on for them. They love getting out of school and doing something a little bit different with different types of resources.
It's not just all talking. There's like bits where you can be interactive and get to build and play and learn about it as well.
To book or for more information, email education@nortonpriory.org or visit the Norton Priory website.